I'm very happy to say that I have the pleasure and the honor to interview Scheree Reed. When I think of Scheree, I think that he is so many things. He is an artist primarily, but he's also a businessman. He's also an advocate, and he's the most awesome medical physical person that I know. And so, what we're going to be talking about is how people on the spectrum are born into this neurotypical world with advantages and challenges and trauma. And I don't know a single autistic person who hasn't experienced trauma, meaning trauma with a small t, the everyday insults, the everyday understanding, the everyday, oh, you're autistic kind of insult. And so Sharia is going to talk about how one can use special interests in mindfulness
Mhm.
to deal with these challenges and trauma. And Sharia is an MA. She'll be telling you about that. I'm sorry, he will be telling you about that. We always have to be careful to respect people and to respect them for who they are. And that includes pronouns. So Sharia, I'm sorry, I will do better. So tell me about mindfulness and special interest and how can we use it to deal with trauma?
Sure. So, first of all, I want to say I'm really excited to be here. Marsha is a good friend of mine, but also a colleague in the autism space. And so I'm excited that we can share this time and have one of our, conversations, but in a kind of meaningful and direct way, a mindful way, if you could say, for those people who are tuning in. So I'm really excited. Thank you, Karen. Thank you to the rest of the Autism Today group and everyone who put a bunch of energy into bringing this together. I'm really excited to be here. So, like Marcia said, I'm Scheree. I use he, him pronouns. I do love to call that out just because one of the things that really brought me to this kind of autism advocacy work is the fact that I fall under a lot of different intersectionalities. So, I am a Black, queer, trans, autistic person. So I'm also disabled in that way. And those things are just part of who I am. They don't really make up everything about me, but they do inform the lens in which I interact with the world and the world interacts with me. And that's true for a lot of queer people, a lot of autistic people, right? Because we tend to see the world differently than other people, we're not encumbered by labels and boxes. So it turns out that people who are autistic or on the autism spectrum have a way higher chance of being queer. So they might use different pronouns than you expect. So I always just like to call those out as a starting point. So to get to the thing at hand, mindfulness and special interests. So my background with being autistic is that I'm late diagnosed. I did not learn that I was autistic until I was 25 years old, at which point I had already gotten married, had a baby, and gone to grad school. And it was in the sort of crush of that experience. For context, I'm from the US. I moved to England for grad school and I took my partner and baby with me. So it was a big deal, right? It was a big deal to think, oh, school, something I'm good at, I've known how to do forever, would become so stressful because I had never done it with a family to take care of. And in the process of that, I suffered a really intense burnout, like really intense, like stuck on the couch for 8 weeks. My partner had to go to work and take care of our baby and take care of me, a pregnant person, all these things at one time. And I had no idea what was really going on. And that process led me to two really big realizations that have really changed my entire life. And so that's why I'm here talking about it, because I'm like, I want every person to know that have, if you are autistic, the world is not necessarily made for your needs, right? I've been reading this really interesting book actually that I'll shout out called Avoiding Anxiety in Autistic Children. Sorry for the blur, but it's by Dr. Luke Bearden. Um, and I really love one of the very first things that he does in this book is use the phrase, I want to make sure I get it right, the predominant neurotype or PNT to describe people who are not autistic, to help really reinforce this idea that just because you are born autistic doesn't mean that there's something disordered or impaired about you, but that you live in a world that was made for a different neurotype, right? And so that having that knowledge accessible to me changed the way I think about myself, and realizing that the things that I love, my special interests, in this case theater, that's what I was going to grad school for, became really a life raft for me to be able to anchor myself during this time where everything was going as wrong as it possibly could. And being able to use that and really lean into this idea of mindfulness, which we'll definitely talk more about, is what made it possible for me to be here 5 days later, healthiest my brain has ever been. And knowing, like, not to say autism is my superpower, because I really, really hate that nomenclature, but knowing that the tools that I have available to me can help me in a world that was not necessarily meant for me. So, really long background, but I think that is an important foundation.
Tell me, you knew your special interest was theater. How does one know one's special interest if it's not totally obvious?
Yes.
Or pick the special interest that's going to be serving the function you're talking about.
Yes. So I do want to start by saying that special interests are a really common feature of autism, but not necessarily every person has a special interest. But I will say that even in the predominant neurotype, right, people have hobbies that they like, or things that they can use that give them a relaxation and restorative ability. So it's okay if you feel like you don't know what your special interest is, because you can just pick something that you like. However, most autistic people do have a specific or a series of specific special interests. That thing that once you just get into hyper focus mode of participating, for some people it's video games. For some people it's trains, right? That's a really stereotypical one, is your little autistic kid probably loves to play with trains. For some people it's horses. For some people it's TV shows, right? Mine growing up were theater and performance. It's a thing that I was just introduced to very early. And when I get on stage, I feel like my mind is clear in a way that I experience with few other things, right? For a lot of people, that's sort of it. So I would say, as you're doing activities that you like, try to pay attention to how your body feels. Now, I know that another feature that often comes along with autism is not necessarily knowing how you feel, not being able to attach words to what your emotional experience is, especially because it tends to be different than the people around you. So for me, it took, that's kind of where the mindfulness comes in. I know some things make me feel elated, like I can't stop smiling. Some things make me feel frowning, like there's a cloud at the top of my head, right? Just trying to take some stock occasionally when I'm participating. If I notice that I'm stimming a lot, it's probably a positive thing for me, right? Just like you notice your cat, when they're happy, their tail swishes back and forth, or your dog might, shake his tail and babies giggle. We have those little tells that you sort of have to learn how to spend time with yourself to see those tells, but they can help us take the path towards, wow, this is a thing that brings me not just joy, but makes me feel restored when I do it. That's the activity that you want to choose when you start thinking about anchoring to mindfulness.
Yeah, I think from my experience that one question to ask is, what have I spent a lot of time doing?
Yes.
Like when I was a kid, I read all the
Yeah.
time. I never was without a book, and I was always drawing. And,
Yes.
so even if I'm not doing a lot of art right now because I'm spending all my time writing and speaking and being an advocate, I know that that's a thing for me. And,
Yes.
that can be another way of looking at it if you haven't,
Yeah.
if
If you're
maybe
not able to
now,
identify.
yeah, maybe right now you haven't made room for your life.
Right. That's
Because
a really huge point. And I am speaking really specifically to autistic adults right now. A lot of times autistic children, they know what they like. If you ask my kids, they're like, I love Sonic, and that's it. Right? Like that's what they're doing in the moment. But if you are, again, a parent of an autistic child, there's a good chance that you're autistic and you maybe didn't even realize that, but you're suffering burnout at a higher rate than your fellow parents. You probably then need to pay attention to, what did I do? You can ask people who knew you as a kid, what was the thing people were all like, oh, Scheree was always doing this as a kid, or what was that thing Marcia was always getting into as a kid? That can give you some insight as well. One last thought I have about this, though, is a lot of people are really familiar with their special interests. They know what they are, they can access them easily. And if that's true, you might actually consider could you find a new special interest? Because it can be difficult when we are exposed to something new to adapt to it well. But if your idea is, I want to participate in something mindfully. So, for instance, I've always wanted to learn how to paint. I'm not good at painting. It's not really a special interest yet, but I thought, okay, I'll get a canvas, I'll get some paints, and I'll just like read about it, right? I'll do the thing I do when I love something, and it's read a little bit more about it to get that information. And because the idea of mindfully engaging with your special interest is about sort of taking it apart into pieces, if you can, figuring out what's the first thing that I do and why, starting to sort of question your process if you can, it can be helpful to start with something new if that's available to you.
Yeah. I mean, so many autistic people are perfectionistic or black and white in their thinking, and either this is good or this is bad, and that might get in their way. So it might help if you talk about what is mindful, because I think mindful might
Mhm.
help keep you in the present and not into all the judgments that you might be making.
Yes, exactly. So I'll tell a little bit of a story to describe how I came to understand mindfulness. And there's sort of two parts to it. One is that when I was in college, so not grad school, but undergrad, I had the opportunity to take a philosophy class where I got to routinely meet a Buddhist monk. So a Tibetan Buddhist monk. His name was Shamar Rinpoche. I also have his little book here called Boundless Awakening, which I know it's too blurry. Anyway, it's called Boundless Awakening, The Heart of Buddhist Meditation by Shamar Rinpoche. And I carry this book around with me because it just feels like a little uh I don't know, like a place that I can open up to remind myself to pause and breathe and just kind of sit in the moment. And that really just opened up mindfulness to me as a special interest. So that's sort of how I got into studying it for so long that I talk about it now. um, the second experience, which really changed my relationship to mindfulness, happened during that deep burnout I was describing in grad school. So for a lot of people, when we talk about mindfulness or meditation, people think about like certain apps that you can use that tell you to visualize the stream and pay attention to your body or practice your breathing. And a lot of those tools are not helpful to neurodivergent people, whether you're autistic or you have ADHD or any other thing. I know we're talking about autism specifically today, but sometimes those things are not helpful. And I struggled with that, right? I can't imagine a pretty field in my head. I need words, right? Or whatever. So it took me a while to try to find a thing that made it accessible to me. And what happened is I had the opportunity to meet with a therapist who came again from an Eastern tradition, like Hinduism as kind of that core of mindfulness and intentionality. And he helped me understand that whereas mindfulness is about being present in your body and mind in the now, sort of all together, the way to get to it can be externally with sensory input as opposed to from your mind out, which I think is how maybe a lot of neurotypical people approach mindfulness. So one exercise that really helped me was taking a tiny little candy that you can observe with all five of your senses. Does it have a smell? Does it have a taste? What does it feel like in my hands? Does it have a sound or the plastic around it? Going through the five senses in a tangible way, something I can literally pick up, touch, look at, feel, taste, mess with, which we see our autistic children and toddlers, and also, the predominant neurotype as well. Little kids do that all the time. They observe the world with their sensory experience. They put things in their mouth, they bang on metal things. They really want to know, what am I getting into? Because we associate that with childhood, I think that relationship with our lived sensory experience kind of gets lost as we grow up. And autistic people are often kind of vilified for doing things that look childish, right? Even if we're stimming, even if we are engaging mindfully in that moment. So to me, mindfulness is specifically the ability to zone into the present, into my body, which again can be kind of hard if you're neurodivergent because there's too bright lights, right? Too loud sounds, too much itchiness. And so being able to center into something that you like doing, that feels comfortable, that brings your body restoration while also focusing on the present moment allows for a mindfulness that I hope is more accessible to neurodivergent people.
And one of the things that I personally have found with so much on my plate is it's the very times when I would need to do this that it's the hardest to do, to
Yes.
make time for. How do you, even before we go into exactly how you do it, how do you make yourself make the time at a time
Mm,
when you're already overwhelmed by everything else?
I love this idea. Um, so this I think has two kind of main answers. One of them is around practice, which is that's why we call it mindfulness practice. For me, art, I'm an artist. Any type of making, creating is a special interest for me. And so my art practice is my mindfulness practice. It means it's something that I try to do daily or weekly or with some routine regularity so that it comes back to me with sort of muscle memory when I'm at the most distress. But that's sort of an advanced solution. It's hard to get to practice if you've never started doing it before, right? And so that's where I think special interests make it accessible. Hopefully, if you know what your special interest is or it's something you can engage in, hopefully it's something that you do kind of all the time anyway. Whether that's daily watching a TV show or playing a game, or I like to collect shiny rocks. And so whenever I travel to a new place, I get a new one, whatever it is to kind of make this like whatever it is that you do all the time, then you don't have to make new time, right? You just when you're and we'll talk, I guess, more into this is how do you turn your special interest in something that can be mindful. But when you do it, that's when you say like, oh, I am knitting right now. I love to knit. Usually it calms me. So when I knit today, I'm gonna make sure to take some time to pay attention to the fibers of my crochets. And that's it. I'm going to take 1 minute either at the beginning or at the middle, or maybe when you need to stop for a break because you realize you've been focusing too hard, to just say like, wow, I'm in this moment. I noticed that the sound of my knitting needles sounds a little bit different because I got new needles today. I noticed that the fiber of the green fabric is a little bit tougher than my blue yarn, right? Those things that, again, autistic people are particularly good at drilling into that hyper focus, the minute details of a thing. And when you look into mindfulness practices, that's what monks are doing, right? Um, Tibetan monks do this thing called the mandala, which is like a circle made up of tiny little beads or stones or beans. And it's a thing that you would sit to do for hours at a time, right? That's mindfulness. But when you're not doing bean art, right? Whatever the other thing is that you're doing, it feels good to give yourself over to that deep, that I keep saying hyper focus, but really it's like a deep observation of things, right? Like, again, to bring it back to your kind of everyday life, a lot of autistic people are often told off for like, why do you care about the fabric that my sweatshirt is made out of, right? Like, don't don't pay that deep attention to it. But it's okay to pay that deep attention to things. It allows you to zone in on the moment. That is mindfulness. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, I can't don't know if Blur is going to work, but here's my shiny rock.
Ah, love that.
And I I actually keep it on my desk next to my
Mm-hmm.
computer. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of there to remind me, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
sometimes visual cues or other stuff like that
Yes.
helps. So
Yes.
now I think it's time for us to take a deep dive into the tools because as
Yes.
you said there's so many people who are autistic and they tell me, oh, that mindfulness stuff doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get more help into what exactly are the tools that people can use.
Yes. Okay. So let's start with this idea of shiny rocks. Okay. Um, in a lot of traditions, the shiny rock has a purpose. The crystal, the rock, the stone outside, the pebble, right? What I have learned as a person who loves shiny rocks, and I'm using this one because I just know a lot of autistic people who love to collect rocks, like the different textures, the different colors. It turns out that historically, traditionally, in folklore traditions, people attach meanings to those things. Blue rocks mean power, green rocks mean calmness, right? Pointy or rough rocks can mean a rough time is coming, and smoother rocks can help you calm down. But that level of attached intention, attached meaning exists with all things. If you look up flowers, the colors have meanings. If you look up plants, anything in nature specifically, that's a good place to get started, is to ask questions. What can I learn about this thing or this item? Just bring it up, right? I love this idea of like multiple questioning, because we do that a lot of the time anyway. A lot of times the anxious spiral that you get in is, what are all the things that could go wrong in this situation? This bad thing can happen. I've experienced this before. What if it's too loud? What if it's this? What if it's this? We already kind of engage in that breaking things apart to its essential nature. So what we want to do is get our brains on a different track, not the what are all the things that could go wrong track, but the just what are the things, right? Observing what is in that moment. So if we're talking about engaging with items, our favorite plushies, our favorite stuffies, our favorite rocks, things that you can physically hold, you can start thinking about it, right? What do I love about this Pokemon? What is everything I know about the water Pokemon? What are all the things that I can list from water to fire to what, expanding out as we're asking these questions. That's a really good mindfulness tool that allows you to disengage from the kind of whatever spiral you're doing to focus on whatever object is at hand. Another way that, oh, I can pause now. Okay. Because this is my special interest. So I'm like ready to go. Another thing that I think is really useful is some type of journaling or tracking that you use along with your special interest. So let's say your special interest is more activity or performance based, right? It's less of an object, a thing that you can physically touch or hold. So an example for me is writing. I love writing. I love words. I've always loved to read. So I wanted to make my own writing. Having an anchor to being able to sit down and play around with words once or twice a week, so good for me. Like really, really useful for just making sure my brain has the revs that it needs to keep going and all the stuff in my body, in my life, right? But it can be hard to remember that I enjoyed writing 2 days ago when I don't feel like doing it today, right? So keeping a track of the number of words written, or just, smiley face for today, frowny face for the day before, or some way that you can you can attach progress over time to that special interest. That really begins to help us to build resilience, right? Sometimes we have object impermanence as neurodivergent people. Just because we loved doing something new 3 days ago doesn't mean it feels good to try something new today. But if we have that record of like, actually, even though I was nervous that I couldn't make it to the new level in this video game, I played for 2 more hours and I did. I know that I can achieve that again. That tracking progress helps us to be able to build resilience and self-reliance, which is really some of the biggest reasons that I think neurodivergent people need access to mindfulness, right? Is that we can start to say, actually, I am sure about what I feel in my body, or at least I have a good idea. I am sure about what works for me and what doesn't. So when someone tells me to do something that's not working for me, I have the confidence to say, no, that's not working for me. It allows us to generate some self-reliance and autonomy that a lot of times autistic people are stripped of.
I think, a lot of people who don't feel like an artist or don't feel confident about writing, I'll either say to them to just don't take it so seriously. You can just write down words, or you can even just go to a site like unsplash.com, which is free pictures that you can use, and just download a picture. I mean, you can sort of use any kind of
Prompt.
expression to
Yes.
to do it. If you have a favorite book, you can just open it randomly to a page, put your finger down, and use that. But there are people
Yeah.
who are ADHD and autistic,
Mm-hmm.
who find it hard to hold still. So
Yes.
do you find that there's such a thing as moving mindfulness?
Yes, I'm so glad that you asked that question. So I am autistic with ADHD, which is really interesting because I really didn't think I had ADHD until I unearthed my autism and was like, oh, I know how to deal with this. And then I was like, oh, actually, I really benefit from getting up and moving around and bouncing up and down. Working out, greatest example of a movement mindfulness, right? But dancing, stimming, one of my favorite autistic colleagues, whose name I'm now blanking on in social media, but will record videos of her literally just like stim dancing. It's not choreographed. It's not, a big tap jazz routine. It's just putting on music and allowing yourself to move the way that it feels like moving. Dancing, working out, any sort of hard labor, chopping wood, right? Like climbing things, anything that engages your muscles is an excellent way to have mindfulness. I've learned that I need to do something hard enough to break through what my brain is thinking about, right? Eventually, lifting 10-pound weights is not good enough for me. I got to move to 20 and break a sweat. Otherwise, I'm spinning in my brain again, right? So, but before I was able to work out, I had no idea of the relationship between moving your body and moving and getting your brain to kind of, I think about it as being nicer, right? Like getting my brain to work with me. A lot of times my brain and body are not in sync, and that's a pretty regular thing that comes up with neurodivergence is, yes, I can see how you do it, and yes, I can even imagine myself doing it. But when I try to make my body do it, it's not doing what I want. So taking time with my body actually helped me to learn more about that relationship or lack thereof. So any type of movement, and I want to also point out, right, not every autistic person is as able-bodied as every other autistic person. And I really, again, using my own experiences, right, I need a lot of mobility aids. Never needed a wheelchair, but like that meant I struggled with moving as a kid. So learning things like isolating my upper body when my lower body is not cooperating, or even like just doing fingers. Like I love doing silly finger stems, which are part of movement, but just saying, can I do up and down, side to side? Can I do side up, up, down? What, just that moment of trying to focus on doing something specific with your brain, that's mindfulness with motion attached to it. So totally possible. Do not think you have to sit still and be quiet to mindfully engage.
Yeah. I sometimes think that you could probably even use something like swimming laps or
Yeah.
run.
Yes. Yes. Running, swimming, climbing, right? Even walking. Some people like biking. Skateboarding, I think, is probably a great, I'm bad at it, but anything that you have to, again, engage the part of your brain that moves your body, really good for that mindful
Yeah.
release.
I think that, at least from my experience, the difference is being able to get into kind of a flow state where you're not thinking about it. So if you're going to walk dopey crossing busy streets,
Yes, yes, that's a
walk
really good,
where you can keep walking and not get creamed by a car.
yeah,
And the other thing that I think is so important, as I said before, is to let go of judgment. I mean, I
yes,
have people who said, well, I'm going to try to work out. And then, well, I didn't do a good enough workout, or I did
yes,
heavy enough weights. And so I think,
mhm,
I mean, would you agree that suspending judgment is
yes,
critical?
yes, it's critical, and it's probably the hardest part, I think, right? Like autistic people are being told by everyone all the time, why are you doing this differently? Is this weird? Why don't you do it like everyone else? So a lot of times that self-judgment that we have is a self-preservation tool, right? It's something that we think we have to use to fit in, right? So it can be really hard to abolish that voice in your head, but that's really what you have to do. I think of it as like my self-cop is acting up, like the person who's trying to police me today is me, and I don't want that. One thing I had to do, and this might sound silly, but I had to think of failure as a special interest that I wanted to pursue. I really was scared of failure. I really struggled with the idea of, what if I try something and I mess it up? What if I want to sing a song and it doesn't sound good, right? What if I want to learn a new thing and I can't? And that by itself feels really scary. It can be hard to push yourself through that barrier. So I started reading books about quitting and failing, things like that as an idea, so that it could be not so scary. The thing I would say, equip yourself with as much information as possible, right? Don't feel like you just have to dive into even being spontaneously, right? That was, someone told me once that I was not a very spontaneous person, and I was like, well, maybe I want to be spontaneous, I don't know. And I learned the reasons I'm not spontaneous is because when I go to a place, it might be too loud or too bright, or I might be away from my STEM toys. So now I just carry sunglasses and earplugs and STEM toys with me, right? I can carry it with me to get to a place where I can be spontaneous. A little bit of a derailment there, but the point is that you are allowed to give yourself the freedom that you need to be successful. Just because you haven't seen someone else doing it doesn't mean that you can't do it. And that is something that I think I'm faced with every day, right? So I really want people to take away that message of like, well, if I don't know what to get started with, or I don't know how to jump in, or what if I don't do it right? Like, it's okay. Make failing on your to-do list, right? Then you can check it off. And then it's
Yeah.
not so scary.
I think that idea of doing it right or not is so important, because often people will tell me that, well, I can't stop thinking, or I'm doing it and I start thinking. And doesn't the practice say something about thinking?
You mean like mindfulness practice?
Yeah, yeah, that
Hmm.
about the kind of monkey brain.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, one of the first lessons, like if you take a traditional approach to mindfulness with breathing, right? One of the first activities they ask you to do is just bring your awareness to your breathing. What does it feel like? How many times have you done it? What's in your body? And the thing that they'll say all the time is the first idea is to close off the judgment in your brain. And the only way you do that is like if you're working with a child, right, who keeps coming back, you just, when the thoughts start to come in that you don't want, you just have to learn how to be aware, like, oh, I'm not supposed to be thinking about this right now because I want to take a break from my anxious thoughts. So let me bring myself back to the thought at hand, which could be the breath in this traditional version of mindfulness. But it could be like sometimes I make myself go like, I want to think about a new flavor of ice cream. Like I'm choosing to think about something different when my brain starts going to that place I don't want it to. Something just to practice the effort of retraining your thoughts. So it's not that you beat yourself like, oh, I can never stop the thoughts from coming in. So I can never do. It's like, yeah, the thoughts are going to come in. That's part of the process. That's part of the practice. What you're doing isn't learning to quiet those intrusive thoughts or unwelcome thoughts or just any thoughts at all. What you're doing is learning to be aware of them and then learning to not pass judgment on them. Then you can learn how to, okay, thought, goodbye. I don't want you today. Come back later, which is, again, talking to myself in that way helps. So, yes, people I think do kind of get caught up in this idea like, oh, well, even if I'm, to use the special interest example, even if I am knitting, right, I might still be thinking about the problems that I have. The last point I want to add about that is that's okay too, right? I find that before I can get into the mindful flow state, I have to give my brain permission to work through a lot of those thoughts. So maybe I'll set a timer for just thinking through, like, oh, this is the worst day that's ever happened. Bad things are going. I don't understand why this person responded this way. How am I going to respond next time? Should I just never talk to anyone again? Like, I give myself time to work through that gnarly bramble, right? And it could be that when you're thinking about when you're thinking about special interest mindfully, right, maybe you have the part of your special interest that you use to gather your materials or set up or unravel your yarn ball. That's the part that you let yourself power through those thoughts. Now that I'm all set up to paint or play or read or whatever it is, right, I'm really listing very general special interests. Now that I have all my things together, I'm going to pause. I like to use gratitude as an anchor and a linchpin. Give, like, I'm thankful to be here right now in my body. What one thing, all the things, however long it takes to settle yourself, and then start with the process of, okay, I'm trying to think about something new. Okay, I'm pushing those thoughts away, right? So you have to give yourself permission to have them. You can't just be trying to delete them.
Yeah, I've heard the metaphors of it's like you're sitting by a stream and your thoughts are leaves in the stream, and instead of grabbing at them, you just kind of let them go by, or clouds
Yes. Yes.
that they come up, but clouds tend to move, and so you
Yeah.
kind don't grab them. You just sort of say, "Oh, there's a thought," and
Yeah.
you let it move by. I
Yes.
just want to go back to something you said before because I find it helpful myself, and sometimes I find other people find it helpful, which is if you're really wrapped up in thinking about something, if you use that writing to do
Mhm.
a mind up
Yes.
and you just write down every single thing you're thinking, sooner or later you run out of stuff to write.
You do.
It's not
Exactly.
infinite. It's not infinite.
I'm shocked every single time, but there's always a stopping point.
Yeah. And
Always, and I
so
always feel better afterwards.
because that, for some of us, we perseverate and you can just sort of like be a hamster going on a wheel where you just go around and around and around. If you write it down, it becomes sort of linear. And
Exactly. Yep.
sooner or later, you've just got it all down there. And then maybe you can take a step back and say, okay, there it all is. And
Yeah. I think that's really helpful to point out because for some people, not everyone, some people I think don't even realize they're caught in that hamster cycle of thoughts. But for some people, and I was always really, and often still am guilty of this, for some of us, it's like, I'm worried that if I take the time to engage with these thoughts by writing them down, then I'm making them real, right? I'm worried that, like, oh, I shouldn't be so upset or I shouldn't be so worried. So I'm trying to pretend I'm not. And so I do want to kind of give us permission to just engage with them, get them all down. I like your, that metaphor of the river with the leaves or the sky with the clouds. But I also want to bring a point that, again, when we're thinking about neurodivergent people, like, it can be hard for us if you see a bunch of leaves go by to not want to stop them, grab them, touch them, feel them, crunch them, right? So when we're thinking about these thoughts, again, if you're in the stream, I do want to give us permission to engage with them as they come up before you let them go and put them back in the stream. Don't feel like you always have to ignore every little kind of thought that comes through, especially when we're talking about that autistic trauma, right? So I do want to come back to this idea of little things like, again, to give an example, which will be better than me rambling through my brain. So my kids are 6 and 4. Both of them have been in school for at least 2 years. And both of them at separate times have held this strong anxiety about going to school because they're like, what if there's a fire drill? I'm like, are you worried that the school will burn up? No, the loudness of the alarms, the startled nature, that I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, everyone has to walk in line so different. That particular experience has been so traumatic to them that even though it only happens twice a year, every single day we have to talk about how there's not going to be a fire alarm today. And we can get a schedule of when the fire alarms will be so we can be prepared, right? That's what we mean when we talk about that trauma that autistic people often experience that doesn't you don't even notice that that's happening elsewhere. And so when we're talking about wanting to like meet our body in the present place, it makes it possible to notice that trauma, realize like, why do I always feel so stressed when I go to this place? Every time I go, I've noticed my shoulders are up here and I'm blah 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 blah. You might not have even realized that you're having that response because you spent so much time trying to just fit in or pretend it's not happening. But once you notice, it's like, oh, I can just carry my earplugs everywhere I go. And I know that that sounds like kind of juvenile. I literally carry 2 sets of earplugs everywhere I go. If I forget them, I turn around and I go back. I don't wear them everywhere I go, but having that additional awareness about myself makes it possible for me to do a lot more stuff. Um, so yeah, I want to make sure that we have that, like, you can give yourself the accommodations that you need.
Yeah, and I mean, and I just want to bring in very, very briefly the concept of masking, because so many autistic people, I used to say women, but a lot of men have said that's true for them as well,
Mm,
don't want to look weird, or
yes.
they want to give the impression of being like everyone else. Nobody else is wearing headphones. Nobody else is wearing a
Yeah.
baseball cap to keep the light out. And so, the whole business of being willing to be visible and who you are and authentic comes in here.
Yes, that's really true. And I think it's important to, again, raise this idea of intersectionality here, where sometimes, especially if you are, for instance, a person of color, a Black man, a queer person, a visibly queer person, it can be dangerous to draw additional attention to yourself. So you have to then make the hard decision of, do I accommodate for myself here or do I try to fit in? And everyone has the right to make that choice, right? I actually will never tell anyone like, stop masking. It's dangerous, it's draining, and sometimes you have to, right? So that's when I say that having a recovery kit, right? If you can't have a preventative maintenance kit because you don't want to wear your headphones or your ear protectors in public, then you have I know that when I get to a certain level, I go into a dark room, like maybe the bathroom, I put them on and I give myself a respite. Like, finding a different tool that you can use is useful. But the other thing I would say is you're gonna be autistic your whole life, right? At some point you're gonna have to decide, how do I want to interact this way? And so choosing the mindfulness is sort of a first step for, again, building that resilience, building that sense of self-awareness, like really just understanding that I'm a person who exists. That means I have the right to exist as I need to, just like everyone else. Building that confidence over time with the practice makes it a lot easier to be like, you know what? I really, really, really want to go to that concert with my friends. So they're going to have to deal with the fact that I wear ear protectors because I want to have a good time. You know what I mean? Like, it becomes a reframing process to understand, how do I give myself, when we talk about the tools that we need, those tools are sometimes invisible. Like, how do I give myself the autonomy? How do I give myself the self-reliance? I give myself the confidence to be weird in public? because I'm weird in private. Like, and I'm using weird with quotes here to describe the difference between what the predominant neurotype expects. It's not weird. It's just what you need. And we should normalize that regularly.
Yeah, I can't say how important I think that is, that self-acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
letting go of the judgment that you've heard from other people all your life
Yeah.
and being centered in yourself and saying that self is good,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The way I explain it to my friends is when you are a disabled person, when you're an autistic person, when you're in any of these marginalizations, and for most of us on the spectrum, you're at least more than one, right? Like all of them, you could, right? The world already makes it difficult for you to be here. Not because you're less than or worse than or so different that you shouldn't be accommodated for, just because they're scared of different. They don't know how to do it. The world already makes it hard for you to be here. Don't make it harder on yourself, right? Don't make it easy for them to make it hard for you. Like if you want to make my life hard, then you're going to have a hard life too by figuring out how to have silent discos every other weekend so I can go dance without being overstimulated, right? It's fun for everybody. That's the last point that I'll make is I really, really do believe that as a society, if we were making the world more accessible to our disabled people, whether that's autism, physical disabilities, anywhere else on the disability spectrum, once we start making increases and accommodations for those people, everyone else benefits 100% of the time, right? Making those differences or those changes is not just for whichever population needs them the most. It always helps everyone. So it's worth making a stink. It's worth making noise. It's worth taking up space because you have as much space on this planet as everyone else does.
Yeah. I absolutely hate functional labels because they're so misleading.
Yes.
But there are those people who will say, Sharia, you are not speaking to everybody on the autistic spectrum. You are, quote, quote, high functioning.
Mm-hmm.
And, what about the people who aren't like you?
Yeah. Yeah. So I thank you for asking this question because I also really hate functioning labels. They're not effective. They don't really help anyone. They just create new boxes for us to sort ourselves into, which is just not helpful. Every autistic person is different than every other autistic person, just like every person is different than every person. Everyone's going to have a series of needs or experiences or things that go well or bad days, no matter what your neurotype is. So it's not useful to provide those functioning labels. To speak to my own experience, I am the kind of person who can support myself in a lot of ways. And I'm the kind of person who definitely has crash out, burnout, meltdowns if I'm not supported the way I need to be. And that means that when I get to that place of burnout, I need all the support. I can barely even shower myself, but you would never know that from looking at me. I actually, this book that I was reading again, Avoiding Anxiety in Autistic Children, uses this equation that I really like, which is that autistic person plus environment equals outcome. So any autistic person put in a high stress environment or an environment that is beyond their sensory experience needs is suddenly a high needs or a high, low functioning type of person. And I think a really good example of this is my partner and I have very different sensory profiles. He cannot stand to be cold. I cannot stand to be hot. And so if one of us is in, the wrong place, we're irritated. And it took us so long to figure out like why do we keep having this thing? And it's just like if I'm in a cold room, I'm fine and he cannot handle it. It's just about the environment, right? So it can be dangerous to subscribe those labels to a person because we also change over time. The more we learn, the more we grow, the more we have our needs met, the more resiliency and pliancy we have available to us. So it's not really fair to box someone into a functioning label that also is only describing a specific point in time.
I think also there's a real societal definition of what's worthwhile.
Yes.
And I think, I mean, I'm curious might say, because you're so thoughtful about everything. But it just seems to be that society is saying if you are fill in the blank, you are not worthwhile. And
Yes.
idea you said before that we are all worthwhile.
Yes. Yes. So I think it's really, really important to think about the context of the world that we live in when we think about worth and worthwhile. And we really struggle with this, especially in Western culture, because we have such a capitalism based culture where it's about, can you go to work? Can you make money? Can you pay your own bills and not be a burden on society? And that's just not how the world has worked for the history of time, right? Like autistic people have always existed. Again, we didn't used to have to go to work all day and hit metrics in a specific goal line that doesn't work for our neurotype. In the same way that we didn't always have schooling in this, like, go to school, sit down, be still, take a test way, that doesn't always work for our neurotype. So it's really important to, I think, imagine what other options are available to us. That's why for me, I love whimsy. I write sci-fi, I write fantasy. I really try to imagine the world where we don't have the constraints of today, because in that world, no, I'm not disabled, right? I don't need to go to work and have 20 meetings a day that cause me to be nonverbal by 5 p.m. in a world where we don't have to go to work, right? So being able to bring that kind of imaginative aspect to what is possible, even in my daily life, makes it possible to say, like, actually, I know for myself that if I have to work a full-time job, I have to go to work remotely, right? If I don't imagine the possibility of doing something different than what everyone else does, it feels like it's impossible or inaccessible to me. So I really do like, I really want people to give themselves permission to start getting creative, be silly, be funny, have play, ask yourself, like, what if, what if, what if? Because that starts opening up the world in which you do have all your needs met, the world in which you can get accessibility at work, the world in which you do start to have the self-reliance and autonomy to say, like, actually, working is not for me, and I need to find a commune of friends where we all figure out how to live together. You only do that if you start imagining your options, right?
Yeah, and I think the idea that's is really important is that there's again so many ways one can express oneself, and there's so many levels. The if someone's apraxic and they're non-speaking,
Mhm.
they still can go into themselves and think. If someone is visual and they think visually, that's their way of doing it. If someone, I think it's safe to say that everybody probably does have a special interest.
Mhm.
And if that's true, at whatever level you engage with that interest, you can, perhaps with the support system helping you, be mindful about it
Yes. Yeah.
or lose yourself in it.
Or lose yourself in it. Yeah. And that, I mean, that's it, right? Like, we say mindful, 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 intention, intention. It's helpful to have these kind of academic philosophical words to create labels, but the reality is it's just play, right? When my kids are deeply focused on building their Lego blocks, they're not like, I'm engaging in mindfulness right now. They're just playing, but it's having the benefits of being focused, of allowing your brain to ask questions, of not being worried about the stresses they had at first grade today, which are real stresses, right? So I think it's accessible to everyone because we all do it all the time, and we have. And it's just giving yourself the permission to think about what you want to think about. And I think that I really want to your point of people who may be non-speaking, right? People who might have different levels of intellectual connection, right? People who don't see the world or move through the world or interact with the world the same way as everyone else are not excluded from this idea of intentional thinking, of mindfulness, right? And so I really want that to be like, even if you're the kind of person who doesn't move their body or say words, you have the autonomy to think about what you want to think about. You have the power, you have the right to exist and have some say over how you're treated and loved and interacted with. And so we shouldn't think about like excluding these mindfulness techniques from any population.
Right. I just think that's so important because you said this before, but I just want to underline it. There's a real kind of prejudice against play, especially when you're an adult.
Yes, yeah,
It's just sort of a judgment. Well, all he's sitting there playing, and you're saying, "Hey, play is good."
yeah. It is good. It is good. And I think all levels, right? Like, one thing I did want to kind of point out when we think about and talk about special interests is, again, autism is different types of people of different levels, different age groups. And so we have to include things like kink and sex and those types of physical, sensual play in this idea of how do we play? How do we STEM? What are our special interests? Because the world is available to, it could be anything, right? Like I think TikTok is a good example of ways that I have learned stuff that, I didn't even know people had special interests and things like this, but there's what they call stick nation, which is people who I think during the pandemic were just going on like walks and they'd be like, wow, look at this incredible stick. It's literally just sticks. Millions of people who are like, wow, that's a good stick. And it's the kind of thing that I know autistic people everywhere. Like, I can't believe people who love sticks are finally getting, they're finally getting people involved in it. I've loved sticks forever. It's just play. We have to be allowed to play. We have to. It's part of, we have to be allowed to rest. We have to be allowed to imagine. We have to be allowed to think. Actually, this brings me to the third book that I brought to talk about in case it came up is called Rest is Resistance, a manifesto by Trisha Hersey, who's the founder of the NAP ministry. And it's really, really impactful in thinking about changing our framework of how we think of the world, like what is our worth in a capitalist system, really helpful in breaking that framework, but also in just helping us to understand that rest and play, imagination, that type of deep, thoughtful, generative work is so important to our mental and physical health. And evenly more so, I think, for autistic people who spend so much time in their heads. We need to figure out how to make that time pleasant, pleasurable, and also sometimes not be in our heads and be in our bodies.
Right, right. That's so if you wanted to have some takeaways that people had from this, and we're not in a hurry to do it, but what would you say?
Okay, I'll try to boil it down to two because you know me, I love to talk. I love to expound and expand. And I'd say that the first one is that everyone matters. Every person born, regardless of if we can hear their thoughts with their words, if we can see their personality with their bodies, every person matters, has this spark of existence of living that makes you worth as much time, space, carbon that created your little cells as every other person who was born onto this planet. Like that's number one, period. Number two is because of that, you're allowed to play. Because of that, you're allowed to rest. Because of that, you're allowed to do what you need internally for you and not what everyone always says you should be doing or what you always see people doing. And I really want to like underline that with three bold lines for the autistic community, where a lot of times we feel like we don't know what's going on and we're trying to watch what's happening and copy it and make sure we're fitting in. And it's like the time for fitting in is over, right? It's 2024. Look at the world around you, right? We need to feel confident in stepping up because we have amazing solutions to global warming, right? We have amazing solutions to wars. We have amazing solutions to just connecting with people on a different, more personal level. And we need to not be so worried about the world coming at us all the time so we can let our true selves, thoughts, solutions shine. I think the world will literally be better because of it. And even if the whole world isn't, right? Your world is when you learn how to take care of yourself.
Would you connect this to the idea of the neurodiversity movement that the idea of inclusion and differences?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I would. Again, I love to talk about intersectionality in general. And for me, I'm always like, my people, right? The neurodivergent, those of us who think so differently, we have to stick together. But really, what I mean is we have to make space for each other, right? And I think that that's really where it connects, right? Is that you can't show up for your neighbor if you haven't already shown up for yourself. We can't even be in community with each other to bring better things for everyone, right? To bring better rights, to bring better disability justice, to bring even better silent discos, right? Things that we can do to hang out on the weekends if we haven't figured out how to take care of ourselves and find out what we need. So yes, I think they're connected.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This has been an absolutely awesome interview because I think that really, the ideas you're expressing have root in traditions that are thousands of years old,
Yeah.
but they're also, I think, very kind of cutting edge and advanced, especially for people who are on the spectrum, who have learned all these judgments, who may not have been told over and over again, you're not as worthwhile, the whole ableist idea.
Yeah.
And, so, I mean, I think, and I wonder if you agree, that really this is an edge for so many neurodivergent people.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's so easy for neurodivergent people to get caught in a box or a bubble. I can't do this because I'm autistic. The world won't accept this because I'm autistic. I'll never be able to because I'm autistic. And what I've learned is that once I stopped thinking about all of those things and I just focus on what do I want to accomplish next, right in front of me? Is it learning how to tie my shoes? Is it learning how to be spontaneous? Is it learning how to engage in conversations with people by saying, I don't like small talk, but tell me your favorite color, right? Whatever it is, I have the power to gain the independence to make the changes that I want. Um, yeah, I think that's something that everybody can hopefully get behind.
Right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and as always an honor. And as you said, we are friends as well as colleagues. So I'm always delighted to talk to you.
You
And
too.
I think everybody has benefited from this. So thank
So
you so much.
hope so, yeah. And if people have questions, just want to get in touch, want to follow along with my books, I write poetry and everything else, follow me on Instagram or send me an email. I think there's notes with those, but it's just my first name at Scheree or Scheree at Gmail. Happy to talk more about any of this.
Yeah, I think we are going to make it Autism Today, meaning we, I'm proud to be on the board, is going to make available both contact information and ideally the books you're talking about, since they did sort of go into the blur. So
Yeah.
again, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, Marcia. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.